Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Venture Fuel Visionaries podcast. I'm your host, Fred Schonenberg. I'm so excited today to welcome Prabagar Sankar. Prabagar is a biomedical engineer and med tech professional working at the forefront of wearable health technologies and medical device innovation. He currently serves as a senior engineer at Intuitive, where he contributes to the development of advanced healthcare technologies, building on years of experience across medical device R&D, health sensing, and clinical research. Over the course of his distinguished career, he has developed wearable health sensor technologies at Sonova, working on medical device systems and regulatory-focused development at Boston Scientific, all the way to contributing to NIH-funded therapeutic device research at Drexel University. He has built a deep expertise in translating clinical needs into practical healthcare technologies. So today we're going to talk about the future of wearable health systems, medical device innovation, and how engineering and clinical collaboration are actually shaping the next generation of patient-centered healthcare solutions. Prabagar, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks to you and your team for providing the opportunity. I'm looking forward to the great discussion.
As am I, and I'm really excited because you've worked across startups, academic research, and major med tech companies from Boston Scientific to Intuitive. What drew you into biomedical engineering, and how has that journey taught you about how to actually build healthcare innovation?
Yeah, I think what really drew me into biomedical engineering was the opportunity to use and apply engineering principles or skills towards a problem of medical origin. So I was really fascinated and impressed by how a technology could really impact patients' quality of life as well as solve a real human problem. I think that's where really my interest started, and then it grew over the years. So I think over the course of my career, I understood that healthcare innovation is rarely a straight line. It's not just about a breakthrough that happens overnight. It's more about collaboration between different cross-functional partners. What I've really learned is that successful healthcare innovation really happens at the intersection of clinical insight, engineering rigor, and then regulatory discipline. I think it's very important to know that how well you deeply understand the clinical need and the problem, how you could design technically and how robust it is, as well as how can you validate them through in order to make sure that it has the adequate safety and the effectiveness to treat the patients. I think it's when all these different together, I think that's when a technology can really move from a lab or a research to a real world healthcare that directly impacts the patients.
Yeah, I'm newly obsessed with the idea of intersection and this idea that it's actually multiple things coming together that makes the opportunity now and right and scalable. And I think the other thing you shared is like there are no overnight successes. Right. It's
absolutely
these things,
absolutely.
You just chip away. Then another technology comes here. And then all of a sudden it feels like it's overnight to anyone that has not been working on it for the past 10 years.
Yeah, it's years of clinical research, engineering rigor, and then regulatory approach.
Are there any emerging healthcare technologies that you're particularly excited about right now?
Definitely, as you mentioned, the intersection of the advancement in robotics with the added capabilities now with AI as well as data-driven insights, it's opening up the avenue for the next gen medical devices. I'm really excited about it. There's a lot of different things that you can do with it, right? Like it opens up the options for remote patient surgery where a surgeon could be in a different place to the patient and then they can remotely perform a surgery. With the amount of data and the AI that's being used, as I mentioned before, I think it's the convergence of robotics, AI imaging, sensing technologies. I think this is going to drive the next gen of medical devices, which is going to enable precise diagnostics, more personalized treatments, and then better patient outcomes.
Very interesting. I think one of the things you've done that's super interesting to me is sort of translate research, maybe early stage lab innovations into real medical devices. And I'm curious, where in the process of sort of innovation to scale, like real world deployment, do you see healthcare stalling? Like, is there a sort of common bottleneck moment, or where things just sort of don't make it into the real world?
In my experience, I think the major challenge has been the translational gap from a research to a real world. So what happens usually is the companies or in an academia or an early research stage would do studies more on testing their technology with a smaller population, smaller data set, as well as controlled environment. But there are several other factors that need to be taken into account when you have to go into a real world, right? There is reliability. The devices will be used in different scenarios. The device will be used by different patients. What's going to be the reimbursement pathway, as well as what's going to be the clinical adoption and market adoption. So I think it's very important to do early stage clinical validation to understand all these different factors, how these all contribute to the success of being integrating into the real world. So I think it's one part is understanding how the device works technically, but if it doesn't naturally fit into the clinical workflow, it's going to have a hard time with the adoption rate. And you want to make sure that how the clinicians delivers a care is really important and it's taken into account at the early stage of the design process. So I think that's where I've seen most of the people struggle is really the translational gap from the research to the real world.
I think it's such an amazing insight and also challenge, right? And it cuts across different industries. This moment of academic or technical exploration to the commercialization piece, where there's regulation, there's scale, there's customers, right? All that. And so the natural thought is, well, why don't you just pull the commercial part earlier into the process? But also that's introducing so much complexity so early that it slows the innovation and often kills a lot of it. How do you navigate that tension of, the immediate thought is just bring it earlier, and then you're like, wait a second, nothing is going to make it across the line if we put too many restraints and too many cooks in the kitchen early on?
I think one thing that I've learned over my career is that it's very important to do concurrent engineering with respect to making all the stakeholders align very early in the process. So you don't, for example, you don't want to have your regulatory person come in later down the design process and then say like, hey, the design that we have doesn't work because of certain things that you have in the product, and you now have to go and change. It's the same case with the clinician as well. It's very important to make sure these different stakeholders are involved a lot earlier in the process. So the way I see a medical device development process is that it's a very iterative loop where the iteration happens like, right, you design and develop a product, and then you give the prototype or your device to all your stakeholders, and then make sure they do the testing and evaluate, and then take that feedback and then go back again and then redesign your product now with all these different feedbacks. As you mentioned, it's very important to make sure that you have to know at what stage, right? You don't want to bring a regulatory person at your innovation or brainstorming stage and then ask them about things which they don't have a say over. So it's very important to know, right, like at what stage to bring in the stakeholders and then give them a proof of concept, and then say like, hey, this is what we are thinking about. This is the technology we will be using to solve this problem. Do you think what will be the regulatory pathway? What are the safety concerns that we need to take into account, and how can we reiterate and then make the product better?
It's really interesting. One of the things that we've thought about often is how do you help that early stage validation and testing and sort of R&D work? Can that happen outside of your own four walls, and then bring that in to the larger organization? And I'm curious from your perspective of, working with startups, for instance, and large healthcare companies, how do you make that partnership work? Is that something that you find valuable, and then how does it work in theory and then in practice?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's where most of these startups have troubles with. I think it's very important to understand what each of the players' strengths are and what they bring to the table.
Yeah.
Startups, they are often very good at moving quickly, so they can experiment new ideas, brainstorm new ideas, and then develop a breakthrough technology pretty quick. But whereas with a larger company, it's a different scenario altogether. They wanted to make sure they have clinical evidence, proper market adoption, proper regulatory strategy, and then they have expertise in all those areas. So I think it's very important that you understand both of their strengths and weaknesses, and then make sure that the expectations align. So one of the area that I've often seen people have struggled with is when they have misaligned expectations.
Mhm.
Um, so startups always wanted to have this rapid adoption, go-to-market strategy pretty quickly. They wanted to say like, oh, this is going to be the next big thing in the market right now. But large companies are always calculative and careful with how they wanted to position as well as launch a product. They are more concerned about safety. We want to make sure that we strategize and then place a product right, as well as we have the proper clinical evidence. I think it's very important to establish clear goals, set proper milestones, as well as make sure that there is transparency and communication between different teams um, with respect to like startups or a larger company, so that
Yeah.
such hardships doesn't occur later in the process. I always felt that that's the best way to go about, because it's very hard for a startup these different expertise, so they can always focus on the technology part, and then they can collaborate with a larger company for all the regulatory market adoption market strategy.
How do you, so obviously, the world that you live in, medical devices, right? It's one of the most regulated industries you can think of, rightfully.
Mhm.
How do you balance that need for innovation, the desire to break through, with the more calculated safety, validation, and regulatory approvals that are necessary, especially as a larger company? How does innovation ever get done is sort of my question within that environment.
I think one of the major goal with uh, medical devices that it's not about building something new every single time. It's about building something that a clinicians can use and a patient can rely on. I think that always comes first. Safety and effectiveness of a medical device always comes above anything else. So I think it's very important that safety and innovation need to go hand in hand together. They're not opposing forces. They're pretty much reinforcing each other. And I think most of we have a different frameworks to do it with respect to medical device. So there are design controls, there are verification and validation strategy, as well as risk management techniques in order to prove and evaluate how safe a device is and stuff. At the same time, it's very important that to integrate all these different aspects, right? Like you have the innovation portion. At the same time, you need to evaluate how safe it is. So I think that's where, as I mentioned before, the iteration process really helps out. Having different stakeholders earlier in the process, making the testing with different people could provide you the feedback that is really needed in order to prove that your device is safe and effective. It's very important because you need to build that trust among people to say that, hey, we could use your device and it's safe, and it proves and helps you out with live a life without limitation. I think is very important. And these two things, as you mentioned, along with the regulatory stuff, needs to be taken into account earlier in the process rather than in later stages.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that you used the phrase before, like concurrent engineering, and I think
Mhm.
that idea of bringing the stakeholder, getting the stakeholders aligned, then bringing them in earlier, and then running these paths concurrently. So you're not necessarily slowing the innovation, but you're making sure that it's thinking safety first, and designing within the sort of frameworks that you've created, uh,
Absolutely.
brings it to market quicker. One of the things I'm
Mhm.
really interested in is sensor technology. We've seen this across industries, and I think everyone knows, like, there's a sensor on everything, it feels like. But specifically, when you think about wearable health, clinicians monitoring patients, and how healthcare systems are delivering care. Is this an area that you see advancing quickly, exploding? How are you thinking about that space?
Uh, I'm really fascinated about it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Think wearable is is going to be an integral part of the clinical ecosystem in future, right? Where we will be moving from a reactive care into a more preventive, proactive, and prevention care. I think the way in which I see it as continuous monitoring of vital signs outside hospital can really shift can make a shift in the healthcare, right? Like rather than just how we have been so far is we've always reacted to something once it happens. So the way in which it's going to change is we will be now able to detect it earlier as well as prevent it from occurring. I think the potential for all these physiological sensing and health technologies immense. And as I told before, I think it's going to play a major role and it's going to become a cornerstone in the clinical ecosystem with how clinicians and physicians are going to monitor the vital signs.
I could not agree more. And it's an easy concept to think of as preventative, diagnosing problems early versus the reaction. But before all this technology existed, it's very difficult to do that and understand what's there. So it's pretty cool. Is there anything you're seeing in that space that you're excited about, or any other next generation devices or digital health that you think people listening should maybe start paying attention to?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, I still feel the continuous physiological vital sign is still has a lot of potential, and it's going to open up the avenue for a lot more in future. With the integration of a wearable, as well as along with AI and the data insight, it's going to open up the potential for a lot more that we could do with vital sign monitoring. Not just from heart rate versus step counts. There is a lot more vital signs in the body that we can actually detect and predict, which would, even with respect to serious diseases, there might be some biomarkers that we could actually detect with a wearable, which could lead to preventing certain serious diseases. I think I'm really excited about this space because it's going to become an essential part of everyone's lifestyle going forward. Everyone is going to have some sort of a wearable that's going to detect vital signs as well as along with the physiological sensing. And it's going to be a space where people would be able to take actions much earlier than later.
All right. Part of me doesn't want to go down this road, but I'm curious your thought. I know some people, I had dinner with a group of folks a little older than I am yesterday, and all they talked about was privacy and this idea of not, they were actually just talking about their personal information, much less intimate than their vital signs, any biomarkers, things like that. Do you think that is going to block this innovation? Is it going to be something like in 5 years, we all just go, hey, the reward is way bigger than the risk. Let's plug in.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question to ask, though. I think it's going to be a place where, from what I've seen so far with respect to privacy, it's morely about the vital sign monitoring database that's going to be stored, right? It's not about a meta information or a personal information that is going to be taken into account. So with respect to how the clinical studies are performed now, it's very hard to have these personal identifiers in order to make sure there is no bias. So I think that's how this whole database is going to be in future as well with respect to wearable health sensing. You would be having a storage of all these different vital sign information. It's nothing to do with any personal information at all. And as always, with respect to any new technology, I think it will slowly go through all its challenges in the early stages. I think we are, in my opinion, we are currently in the mid stage. There is still potential for growth with respect to how wearables are. There are still some hesitations from people with respect to data and privacy and what the companies do with it. But I think, as you mentioned, in 5 years, it will be the reward for the wearables would be much higher than the other things that needs to be that really affects it. So.
It's I'm about to transition you over to our rapid fire session, so get ready. We're going to ask you a bunch of questions.
Okay.
We should probably have hooked you up to a wearable so we could see if this raises any blood pressure or anything. But it's funny. I have a good friend who was a very early investor in Aura, the Aura rings, and so I got to try it really early, and I loved it. But I was obsessed with it. I became so gamified and competitive with myself to get better sleep and all that. And in one way, it was really good, but it was intense. Like I was like competing to be more rested, right? It's like, how do I relax more? And it's like, well, maybe stop thinking about it all the time. So it'll be interesting to see what unexpected changes to human behavior happen as part of this more frequent sensing.
Absolutely. I think, as you mentioned, it opens up potential opportunities to certain things which I've never thought about before, which was possible a decade ago.
Yeah. It makes it fun. Anyway, so I'm going to give you a couple quick questions. Give me, your gut answer on them. So Absolutely. The first one is, what healthcare problem are you most passionate about solving?
Definitely early detection and diagnosis of very serious diseases. I think identifying them earlier would lead to people having a better outcome.
What's one misconception people have about medical device innovation?
People often think breakthrough happens overnight, but it's years of clinical research, engineering, and regulatory work.
Is there a skill that is consistent across med tech innovators? Is there something you all share?
I think it's the ability to bridge engineering techniques and principles with a real clinical need.
I love that. What technology in healthcare is most overhyped right now?
Definitely AI solutions which promise transformations without strong clinical evidence.
What is most underhyped?
Continuous physiological signal sensing as well as health technologies.
What role will data play in the future of healthcare? We kind of talked about that one. I think we covered that actually. It's going to be the base, the foundation, right?
Yep, it's going to be the foundation and the cornerstone for the future healthcare. I think it's going to help in shifting from a reactive to proactive care.
What do you think is the biggest barrier to innovation that established companies face?
I think it's really more about the different layers added to it. Sometimes if you don't do concurrent engineering, it stalls the progress. It's very important for companies to do concurrent engineering to push products out much earlier.
What advice would you give engineers who want to build real-world scalable healthcare solutions?
Spend more time in understanding deeply the clinical problem and the patient needs rather than just the technology.
What startup idea in healthcare do you wish or would love to see someone build?
Definitely integration of a wearable with predictive data analysis along with the AI data insights. I think that would be really cool.
So what impact do you hope that your work ultimately has on patients and the world?
Help live a life without limitation.
I love it. Well said. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's been a complete pleasure and wishing you a great rest of the day.
All right. Thanks, Fred. I think I really appreciate the opportunity to thank you and your team for giving me the opportunity.